Great. Well, hopefully we won't preach long tonight. We know when we need to be done. I don't know if you heard the story about a preacher who was going on and on and on. A guy came and this guy came with his wife. This guy didn't usually come to church, and the preacher just kept going and going, and it seemed like he would get to the end of his third point or fourth point, and he'd add some more on, and he'd just keep going. And the guy leaned over his wife and said, "I'm leaving." And she said, "Can't leave, Well, the pastor then kept saying, like, "In closing," and then go on for another 20 minutes or so. And the guy really couldn't handle it anymore, and he finally said again, "I'm leaving." She said, "You can't leave, you'll embarrass me," And finally he just got up and said, "I'm leaving." And she said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "I'm going to get a haircut." And she said, "You should have gotten a haircut before you came here." He said, "I didn't need one before I came here." Hopefully we won't be here all that long, but you need to get a haircut. The Bible is an important book, and I hope that you won't use these meetings to be the only time you're in the Bible this week. Hopefully you'll take some things. By the way, I hope you have something to write with tonight too, okay? And I made a piece of paper. I'm going to give you so much stuff, not because that's just like that means that it's good, but there's a lot of things to cover tonight, and we got to get it all in because tomorrow night is the next part that we're supposed to go with. But please, if you can, get a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, maybe you borrow one, use your lipstick or something you need to write something with, or a child's crayon or something. But if you can just write down, I would say if you can just write down two things, okay? You won't remember 99% of it, but if you can just write down two things maybe, and you get out of tonight, that would be helpful. I don't know, but the Bible, you can't base your faith on your pastor's walk with the Lord. You have to have your own walk with the Lord, and that means we got to be in the Word. Amen? There's a story of a lady who that she had the pastor over to her house. And that's a good thing, right? To have the pastor over for a meal. And she cooked this nice meal, and when she got done, then the pastor was very nice and everything, and the pastor left. And she said to her husband later on, she goes, "Honey," "I think the pastor stole one of our spoons." Okay? And so she couldn't figure that out. He seemed like a nice guy, and he's always prim and proper in the pulpit, and seemed to be a man of ethics and things. And she thought, "He stole one of my spoons." So you ladies know what spoons you have and what she had set out. She knew that. And so for a whole year, this really bothered her that this pastor would steal a spoon of her. She couldn't figure out why he would do. If you would have asked, she could give it to him and bought him one, like on eBay or whatever. And so for a whole year, it really bugged her. And so finally, they had him back over one more time. And so they came, and he came, and he was sitting there, and they had a nice meal. And finally, she just couldn't stand it. She'd been thinking about this every day for a year. And finally, she said, "Pastor, I just have to ask you a question. Last year, did you take one of my spoons?" Okay? That would become an awkward question. But, and he just sat there and looked at her and said, "No." He goes, "No." He goes, "I put it in your Bible." So, you don't want to have that happen to you. So, hopefully you'll read your Bible sometime this week, besides just what we have here tonight. All right. 1 Peter, chapter number 5. I want you to look with me at verse number 5 and 6. 1 Peter 5 and 6. It says, "Likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Yea, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility. For God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time." Let's pray together, and I'm going to ask the Lord to really meet with us tonight. We are looking at the subject tonight of the matter of what this verse says, be clothed with humility. Now, I want to ask you, around your home and around the people who are closest to you, would you say that you're often clothed with humility? This idea would be talking about like an attitude of humility that characterizes you. Would people say that you're a humble person in the way that you go about situations and disagreements with people and perhaps some conflict that comes up, or when you have problems in your family, or when somebody, maybe in the church even, has a disagreement with you, or says something you don't like, and all that. I'm sure that never happens here, but we'll just talk theoretically tonight, okay? That this can happen in places. So, but if you say, you know what, I might need help with humility, or I sometimes struggle with pride, okay? Let me just say this way: I have a whole other message on root issues of sin, and pride is one of them. And the issue about pride is that it's so important into the DNA of sin, actually. You cannot sin without pride, okay? So if you have sinned today, there was pride involved. If you ever got into a disagreement with somebody and got to an argument, and you got hot on the collar and things were said, there was pride. And so I wonder if we need to extinguish pride tonight in our lives, if we need a good dose of humility. And so this is the message God led to us tonight to kick off this conference, being clothed with humility in the home. Let's pray together. Father, I pray that in the name of Jesus that you would meet with us starting right now. I beg you, we don't have nothing, we don't have a leg to stand on. We have nothing to say. This would be why you need to meet with us. All of our righteousnesses are as filthy rags. There is nothing in our flesh that is good. And the only things good in our life are the things you've done. And we just ask you to, in your great mercy and love and grace, would you do something good again tonight in our midst that's not deserved, but nevertheless, there are those of your people who have called out to you and asked you to meet with us and do something. And I pray that you would. I pray that you show yourself strong. I pray you answer prayers. And I pray that somebody would maybe just take an inward look and see if there be any wicked way. And Lord, may we not think that other people have problems and I struggle here too, and it's no big deal. Lord, we need to not wonder if it's a big deal. We need to, if it's a small deal, if it's a thing that looks to us small, it still put you on the cross, still put your son on the cross. We pray that we would be honest enough with you that we want to deal with if there is any pride, or if we at times have not been humble like we should in the face of maybe someone who was angry at us, or somebody who was who had said something about our family or someone that we care about. So Lord, help us tonight. Do great mighty things from this moment forward in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. I think sometimes we think better of ourselves than we really are. You may remember, those of you who are a little bit older, even those who are not older might know the name, but back in the 70s or so, there was a very famous boxer named Muhammad Ali. I remember Muhammad Ali. And he was a little before my time, even though I totally know who he is, but I don't remember much about when he was actually actively fighting, boxing. But he would say a phrase. And what was that phrase? I am the greatest. I'm the greatest, okay? And that's what he actually would say. That was apparently, and I don't again know his personality. I don't know if it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, or if he really was just kind of demented, thinking he was the greatest. But he would say this, and the story goes that one time he was on an airplane, and the stewardess said, you need to, Mr. Ali, you need to put on your seatbelt. And he said, I am the greatest. And he said, Superman don't need no seatbelt. Okay? And he said, Superman don't need no plane. Okay? Anyway, so he apparently thought of himself more highly than he ought to think. And often we do this. and some struggle with it more than others, but again, it is a problem every time a man if you struggle with it. So let's look at what God has for us tonight. James 4:6 uses this exact same phrase that we see the last part of verse 5, where it says, God resists the proud and giveth grace to the humble. James 4:6 says, but he gives more grace. Wherefore he saith, God resists the proud and giveth grace unto the humble. Colossians 3:12 says, put on therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, vows of mercy, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering. So we're supposed to be humble in our mind. There's a number of ways to be humble. We're going to see a number of them. But this is an important message because it hits at the root of everything that can go wrong in a home. Okay? If there are arguments, if there is discord, if there is debating, if there is anger, if there is arguing all these things, it's because pride. Is that me? Come on, hit it. I'm too proud to admit that. That's interesting. Okay. So, trying to get that close again. Everything that can go wrong or be a mess in our relationships, with pride involved. Now we can point the finger and say, yeah, the person that that I got a problem with, they got a lot of pride. It just kind of exudes off them. Okay? Well, maybe sometimes we gotta look in the mirror, and we're not the best ones always determining, whether we're proud or not. The quote attributed to Bob Jones Sr. says, "Pride is the only disease known to man that makes everybody sick except the one who has it." Okay, and so sometimes we're proud we don't even know it. And we're going to look at some symptoms of pride here in a moment. Pride's hard to detect. It hides its other problems. It doesn't like to be seen. So we can have pride, and that can keep us from reconciling with someone, and we can say, well, there's a jerk, or if you knew what they said about me, or if you knew what they did, or if you know what they, how they're really like. And so pride hides, and it doesn't want to come out in the open because then we have to deal with it. So we always want to point in another direction. There are two aspects of pride. This is not part of your notes, but there's part of it would be attitudes about yourself and then attitudes about other people. And we'll look at that as we go here. But pride is always revealed eventually in your relationships with other people. So if you're proud, it's always eventually going to show up in relationship to other people. So first of all, the explanation of pride. What is pride? Just a couple definitions here, and you're going to be selective unless you brought a whole notebook with you tonight on what you're going to write down. Because in just a minute, I'm going to give you 9 points that are going to talk about pride. That was a pastor's wife saying that. Oh boy. So now I've just added 3 points on because I really felt like we really need to help anyone sitting in the front row tonight with these issues. The explanation of pride is, there's a couple ways you can say it, but it's essentially a lifting up. Okay, this is what the idea is. It's taking an exalted position. It's the opposite of staying low. Okay, which would be humility, which we're going to deal with on the second half of this message. We're going to deal, first of all, with pride, which keeps us from humility. But these verses say, let you be clothed with humility. So this is supposed to be the everyday outfit of a believer. We're supposed to actually be clothed with humility. And just like you can see the outfit I have on right now, you can know if I'm a humble person if you're around me enough. Now I hope I am, but I wouldn't want to say like I'm proud to say, I'm very humble, okay? You may have heard about the preacher who apparently was a really good man, and so his church actually said, we're going to give you an award, and they gave him the award of the most humble person, okay? And, he really appreciated it, but he appreciated it so much, the next week he comes and he still has it on, and he's walking around. And so it's easy to fall into, you can be humble in one moment, and then the next, pride can just show up. It's a high regard for oneself. Romans 12:3 talks about thinking of yourself more highly than you ought to think. Okay, so that would be another way to say pride. It's a high regard for yourself. It's an exalting of yourself in some way. Matthew 23:12 talks about whosoever exalteth himself shall be abased. But it's the idea of exalting yourself in some way or another. It shows up in a couple different ways. I'm going to say a couple more things here before we get to the 9 points. It shows up in thought patterns, for instance, in the way you think. 1 Corinthians 10:12 says, let him that thinketh he standeth, take heed lest he fall. So it can show up in your thinking, Galatians 6:3 says, if a man thinketh himself to be something, he's not, he deceives himself. All right? So pride can show up in the way we think. About the way that we think about ourselves or the way we think about who? Others, okay? But it also shows up in not just thought patterns, it shows up in life patterns. Okay? In other words, acting in pride-driven ways. Okay? So you can think proud, or you can kind of live out that pride, and we get that from 1 John chapter 2, where it talks about the pride of life. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. So you can have life patterns where you're just living in a way to exalt you. A man named Stuart Scott, who's written on this, says, to sum it up, it's the mindset of self, the pursuit of self-exaltation, a focus on the desire to control all things for self. Okay? And that's what we would do many times we could. We would try to control all things so they would work out good for ourselves. Okay, so if I go to the doctor and I'm sick, and I go in there, and usually the doctor's not the first one in, maybe there's a nurse, and they sit down there and they type some stuff and they say, what are your issues? Okay? Now if my wife's there, she's like, we don't have enough time to go into his issues. Let's just talk about his sickness here, okay? But what they mean is, what are your symptoms? What's going on? And so I'll sit there and say, well, I just have a headache, and I was in the doctor a few months ago, and she's like, well, is the headache in the front or is it like all around, And I wasn't expecting her to ask that, so I'm like, which one will get me the medicine, And so, pick it out a little bit, and I'm like, it's just my whole body, and now that you mention it, nurse, it's all over the body. And so, and so then you say, well, I got a headache, and I've got, my eyes are watering, or, I'm seeing spots on the walls, or, whatever. And so then they take a notes, and they try to figure out what you have more deeply wrong with you, right? So they would say, oh, you got a problem with, your nose is running. If you go down to CVS, buy some Kleenexes, you're good to go. What they're going to do is try to solve the deeper problem, because these are the symptoms that are showing that there's something else wrong in your body. So we can't always see pride because it does hide itself. We're going to look at 9 symptoms of pride. Okay, I'll try to go fast, and if I don't go fast enough, then go ahead and walk out, and that'll be pride. So number 1. A revelation of pride, or the discovery of pride. Would you like to know pride in your life? First of all, is this. It manifests itself in self-serving communication and actions in the family. Kind of a big phrase. Self-serving communication and actions in the family. And you could also just say, around people that you're close to. So when you're able to kind of just be yourself, it wouldn't have to be your immediate family, but it's self-serving communication and actions in the family. Some people in this say I have 2 sides to them. It's a side that we see at church, and it's a side that's at home, right? And I don't think any of us are going to say, no, that couldn't be. Okay? Sometimes we see it in ourselves. Sometimes we see that we're not consistent with, maybe there's a man here who's like super nice around people, and he's Mr. Congenial here at church, and he's helpful, and he smiles, and, if someone trips, he'll be like, oh, and I'm sorry, about that, and someone spills something, he's there to help pick it up, and holds the door for ladies, and he gets in the car. And you're not quite down to the corner here. And there are symptoms of self-serving communication or action. Maybe gruffness that the kids were getting in the car slowly, or that the wife, was moving, did not come out right away from church, or whatever it is. There's 2 sides sometimes to a person. Maybe it's that you're a mom or a lady, and at church, you love the Lord, and you're here, and you're a nice person, but if the truth be known, behind the scenes, you're an angry woman. Okay? And you might say, well, everybody, has a problem with anger. Well, we're not talking about everybody tonight, okay? We don't want to talk about everybody because you can't solve everybody's problem, but we want to ask, do you want to solve yours? Okay? It doesn't really matter if people are very angry. The fact is, do we give in and exalt ourselves and we're angry back? But we can be angry in our words or in our actions. Ephesians 4:29 talks about let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of what? Edifying, that it may minister grace to the hearer. Okay? So, you might want to write that reference down, Ephesians 4:29. It says the things that are supposed to come out of our mouth are that which are good to the use of edifying, which means building up people, that it may minister grace. So, I just want to ask you a question. Could you say that I think, by God's grace, that when I talk to people in my family that know me the best, and when I'm, maybe there's a disagreement, or, people are tired or sick, or things haven't gone wrong, think about your immediate family, but then if you can't get a really good mindset in that, go a little further. Do you have a history of ministering grace to people with your words? Do you have a history of using your communication to build people up? You might say, I don't know, I'm as nice as the next guy, okay? But I wonder, what would people say about you? Do you tend to, I just have to be honest here. I have found that with myself, I was sick a couple of years ago, very, very sick, and in bed a lot. And some of you know that, and I appreciate those of you in this church you've just been great in a number of ways, and I'll mention that as we go through the week. But very sick, and some of you were praying for us on a regular basis. And we were diagnosed with borreliosis, which causes Lyme. And we were out of it for 2 years. I was out of it. And my wife was trying to figure out what it was for a long time, and she's taking care of me, and she's having to manage the kids and doing all these things while I'm in bed, literally. And I was the pastor of a church. Okay? I was missing church. And they'd come visit me and say, Pastor, we'd like you to come back, I got things to do, got to bed. I have found that sometimes those symptoms are still around. The symptoms, if there's stress, if there's lack of sleep, and things like this, and everybody gets sick, but I found that my body actually changed as a result of that sickness. And things can kind of come up now and then, and you know how it is, things can come up, maybe you have something that's surges every once in a while, surfaces. And I find that I actually, when I'm not feeling well, I talk about it. And it's dawned on me recently, that is not minister grace in my life. My wife does not need to hear one more time, that I'm not feeling well today. For 2 years she had to bear that cross. Okay? And I'm just telling the truth. I'm not trying to be selfish or anything. I'm just, she'll say, how are you doing? And I'll be like, I don't feel so good. And then, and then no, we'll talk to her about this. Okay, that'll make you really angry. But anyway, because I don't want her to think, I don't want her to know, I hope that she just realizes, wow, my husband Dave, he's actually asking about me. He's actually concerned about me. It's not all about him. Okay? So think about it. Is your life and your conversation just a lot about you? Now, you have a real life, and it's important, and you can have real struggles, and you might have real pain, and you might have real concerns, and maybe your family, maybe on your side of the family, someone's got cancer or something, so there's this concerns about things that more pertain to you than to your spouse or somebody else. So it's natural, because we talk about the things that we're concerned about. Nothing wrong with that. Out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. You're concerned about something, you're going to talk about it. But do you ever, is it like a one-sided thing where you're talking about things that pertain to you and your concerns and your worries and, your boss and all this sort of thing? And it's like, well, what about everybody has a burden to carry, don't they? Everybody has a cross. And are you trying to help someone to rise above their problem? Okay? So we can lose ourselves in, not that we're talking dirty. By the way, Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth. I've done some study on these words, and sometimes the idea of corrupt would be like rotting fish. It doesn't mean that you're telling dirty jokes. Okay? But then it says, but instead of doing that, do that which is good to edify. Okay? So corrupt communication just might be something it's just not right. It's not helping anybody. It's just kind of talking. James 3, 9 through 10 talks about our mouth. It says, therewith blessed we God, even the Father. And then it says, therewith cursed we men, which are made after the similitude of God. So James 3:10 says, out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brother, these things ought not so to be. Okay? So can I ask you, is that right that we're so nice at church, and we're so nice to the people that, our circle of friends, and we're nice when our reputation will be shot if we were angry, but then when the real us is out there, okay, do we have cursing, as it were? I don't mean swear words. I'm talking about, we talk nice about things around people, and then we're at home, we're like, did you see how those kids were acting? Did you hear what the pastor said? Why would he say that? Was he preaching to us? Does he think he's perfect? I mean, and what about that lady who did this? And what about, how come they didn't clean up the nursery? Or, and there's all this backstabbing going on. Criticizing.
It's good, preacher.
And the question is who is this helping? You know who it helps? It helps me when I do it. It exalts me. Because I want to be negative. That's good. Colossians 4:6, let your speech be always with grace. The word always means always. Seasoned with salt. Okay? So your speech is to be always with grace. So again, with a minister of grace, and if we get no further in this message, which if you're a man of prayer or a woman of prayer, we are going to get further than this. But think about it. In your communication, is it kind of self-serving? Now, you may never thought about it, and it wasn't intentional, and you weren't even, except the cursing, the tearing people down and backstabbing stuff, that would not be good. But if you're kind of like, yeah, I do talk about my problems, I do talk about my burdens, I do talk about that, to the extent that I'm really not looking around too much, or I'm trying to build somebody else up. Okay? Then if you never thought about it before, then that's going to be worth this whole week. Okay? Because you can go home tonight, or you can get on the phone tonight, and in your next set of communication, you can be asking about another person. If they ask about you, just turn around on them. The best thing I can do if someone says, how you feeling? Okay? Well, I can go into a litany. I can get out my big notebook and say, which day you're talking about? Or I can just say, oh, not too bad. How are you, brother? I know that you were, years ago you had this or whatever. I don't have to spend the next 20 minutes doing it. Don't you hate when you're at church and say to someone, how are you? And they really tell you. You're like, it was just 4 or 5 minutes. I don't care. This is what we do. We're taking hands. All right. So pride highlights the negatives of other people when the conversation comes around them, and it's corrupt communication. It's self-serving. The critical tongue. You can be a person who's moody. This type of thing. It's self-serving communication and action. 2 Corinthians 10:1, a great passage, talks about our manners, and it talks about Paul says, I beseech you by the meekness and gentleness of Christ. And that's how we're supposed to be helping people. If you're a mom or dad here, can I just ask you, we're just going to go for it, okay? When you try to help your kids, sure they're bad sometimes, sure they're disobedient and all this, but do you beseech them with the meekness and gentleness of Christ? Or are you more like, if you don't do it right, if you're going to get 27 spankings, and that's just this hour, and on the hour, we're going to ring in the new year with spankings, okay? Or are you like, in other words, do you think Christ wanted you to be meek and gentle too? In other words, does he manhandle you when you disobey? Does he threaten you, for the next 20 years, like, you can't go to hell, but anything short of that, Or is he gentle? Isn't Christ gentle with us?
Yes, sir.
Psalm 130 says, Lord, if thou wouldst mark iniquities, who would stand? In other words, if the Lord was keeping track of everything and giving it its just retribution, who would stand? And the answer is no one. It's a rhetorical question, but he says, but there is forgiveness with thee that thou mayest be feared, which means reverence. In other words, the reason we reverence God and love him is not because he's always going to just nail us, right? It's because he doesn't nail us sometimes, and we certainly deserve it. Now, I'm not telling parents to say something and don't ever discipline your kids. I'm talking about your manners. Is it kind of self-serving? In other words, the action is a problem to you because it's interfering with what you want to do. You were trying to read, you were trying to study, you were trying to get the meal ready, and they're being too noisy and it's just getting to you. It's not really about their disobedience. It is, but it's more about the fact that their disobedience is messing with you. You get my point?
Yes.
Okay? And that is what often, if an angry man will be, he in the home, he'll deal with his children roughly, is because they're messing with his agenda, which is he wants it quiet when he wants it quiet. You can say, well, the dad can have it quiet when he wants to. Why? And I'm not saying you can't, but I'm just saying, who died and left you God? You know, and you say, well, I'm the man of my house. Maybe your kids, maybe you need not quiet time. Maybe you go sit down in the chair with them and talk to them. And give up some of your quiet time, or give up some of your TV time, give up some of your newspaper time, give up some of your Fox News time, and go sit with them and find what's going on in their life. Sometimes the only interaction parents have with their kids is when they're disciplining them. Number two, okay, so self-serving communication. Number two is deflecting blame for selfish communication and actions. So these two go together. Deflecting blame. So we can have self-serving communication, anger, criticisms and things like this. But then, number two, pride shows up when we deflect blame for this. There was a man who I've read about that has been part of a large ministry to help men with sexual addiction and things like this. And he came out of sexual addiction. And he said, before he got right with the Lord, he said, he was all about, and he said, either he called himself this or someone else referred to him as this. He said, I was Mr. Minimizer. Okay? In other words, up till he really got right with the Lord and he got broken, his whole thing was minimizing his sin. Like, oh, I'm not doing stuff that bad, or it's not as bad as it could be, or I'm better than I was, 2 years ago, or, you didn't keep bringing up the past, someone was confronting you about it. Everything was minimizing the blame that could fall on him. And I just want to ask you, do you minimize your issues? Do you deflect the blame? You don't want the blame. Nobody wants the blame. No one's making up for you. Go to someone and say, hey, tell me what's wrong with me today. Nobody's going to do that. But when blame does come, it takes two people to have an argument. And so if you take blame for your side of it, pride always defends itself. It always has a comeback. It minimizes or brings up another issue. It shifts the blame. It finger points. Proud people never let the blame totally settle down on them. There's always a but. And let me say this. Do you know that you'll never break free from the things that are really besetting sin to you until you truly repent? But when you go to God and you repent, there cannot be any buts. It can't be like, Lord, forgive me for being such a hothead, but, if you help this, or, help my kids read better, or have my wife be more respectful, or whatever, God's not interested in kind of half forgiving you, or like kind of a half sin. You're kind of like, yeah, but, and he's like, what's he going to do with that? And you didn't nail him to the cross or not. That's good. And sin is always intentional. It's not even sin if your will's not involved. So the definition of sin is that you chose to do it. So if you choose to do it, and if you are choosing to do a certain thing, selfish communication, then take the whole blame for it. Don't blame, say, well, she yelled at me first, or if you knew how my teenager was talking to me, all sorts of stuff. I get it. I would like to squeeze out of it too. Doesn't mean it's right. And if I'm shifting the blame in my mind, I don't even know if I'm forgiven. Because what does God forgive me for? It wasn't sin, it was understandable, that's what it was. If you knew who I was married to before. So it's like Adam in the garden. The Lord comes to him and says, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten the tree? That's what he liked to. And he said, the woman that you gave me, she gave me the fruit and I ate. And he didn't answer the question. That's good. He dodged the question of have you eaten of the tree. He says, the woman that you gave me. So he does say, she gave to me and I ate, but he definitely front loads the whole thing with her. In fact, he even says, the woman you gave me. That's good. Do you take blame for that which is your selfishness? How open are you to acknowledging blame and admitting your wrongdoing? Pride does not let a person feel the full weight of their selfish actions. Number 3, thoughts of superiority. Thoughts of superiority. Do you have thoughts of where you think yourself more superior than somebody else? Now, this would kind of go toward the thought part of it, which is what the point is, thoughts. It's for the thinking thing, not the actions. But let me just mention a few things here. In what ways do you highly regard yourself? What are you quite pleased with and maybe a little smug about? You know, smugness is bad, it's hard to deal with for other people because it's so ridiculous. It's like, I'm not impressed, you know? How do you think yourself superior? Is it because of a position you've attained now? You worked hard, you got this position, you know, or you got a raise, or you got a promotion? Would it be your education? Would it be your knowledge of a certain field, you know, computers or cars or hunting or sports? Amen. Would you be proud about your family background? Proud about your intellect? Proud about your intelligence, your talent, your ability, your physical features, your job, your standards? Can we be proud about things that are spiritual? Yeah. It's called spiritual pride. I want to read something to you here. And later on, if you want a copy of this, I actually would love to give you all a copy of this. But that'll be up to Pastor Hawkins if he wants to do that. This is it's by Jonathan Edwards. Remember Jonathan Edwards? One of the greatest preachers of all time. And he has a 2-page thing here called Understanding Spiritual Pride. It absolutely will blow your gaskets. I'm just going to read a little bit to you. And he says, the first and worst cause of error that prevails in our day is spiritual pride. This is the main door by which the devil comes into the hearts of those who are zealous for the advancement of religion. You're serious about the advancement of the cause of Christ. He says this is the main door, spiritual pride, by which the devil comes in the hearts of those who are zealous for the advancement. It is the chief inlet of smoke in the bottomless pit to darken the mind and mislead the judgment, and the main handle by which the devil takes hold of Christians, and the chief source of all the mischief that he introduces to clog and hinder the work of God. Wow. Until the disease is cured, this disease is medicine verified in vain to heal all their diseases. He said, pride takes many forms and shapes and comes to the heart like the layers of an onion. When you pull off one layer, there's another one underneath. Therefore, we need to have the greatest watch imaginable over our hearts with respect to this matter, and to cry most earnestly to the great searcher of hearts for his help. He who trusts his own heart is a fool. The spiritually proud person is full of light already and feels that he does not need instruction, so he is ready to despise the offer of it. We'll look at this in our notes a little bit. On the other hand, the humble person is like a little child who easily receives instruction. He is cautious in his estimate of himself or herself, sensitive as to how liable he is to go astray. If it is suggested to him that he does go astray, he is most ready to inquire in the manner. Let me ask you, is that you? If somebody would suggest that there's something that you need to work on in your life, or if the pastor preaches a certain way and there's this thought like, yeah, I need to work on that, okay? If you're humble, you're going to be most, according to Jonathan Edwards, you're going to be most ready to inquire into the matter and try to find out, Lord, I need to know more about this. Man, I should go talk to someone about this. Do they see this also? This counts on my heart. Where does this come from? Okay? Proud people tend to speak of other sins. No, here we go, okay? You're in a good independent Baptist church. This is what is at the heart of many of our churches, right here. Here we go. Proud people tend to speak of other sins, the miserable delusion of hypocrites, the deadness of some saints, with bitterness, or the opposition to holiness of many believers. Pure Christian humility, however, is silent about the sins of others. So a truly humble person is silent about the sins of others, or speaks of them with grief and pity. The spiritually proud person finds fault with other saints for their lack of progress and grace, while the humble Christian sees so much evil in his own heart and is so concerned about it that he is not apt to be very busy with other hearts. That's good. He complains most of himself and his own spiritual coldness, and readily hopes that most everybody has more love and thankfulness to God than he. Spiritually proud people often speak of almost everything they see, in others in the harshest, most severe language. Commonly, their criticism is directed against not only wicked men, but also toward true children of God and those who are their superiors. It goes on. Proud people take great notice of opposition and injuries, and are prone to speak often about them with an air of bitterness or contempt. Christian humility, on the other hand, disposes a person to be more like his blessed Lord, who when reviled did not open his mouth, but committed himself in silence to him who judges righteously. I would have through here 2:21. For the humble Christian, the more clamorous and furious the world is against him, the more silent and still he is. Another pattern of spiritually proud people is to behave in ways that make him the focus of others. It is natural for a person under the influence of pride to take all the respect that is paid to him. If others show a disposition to submit to him and yield in deference to him, he is open to it and freely receives it. In fact, they come to expect such treatment and to form an ill opinion of those who do not give them what they feel they deserve. There's much more, and I just skipped around. If you'd like a copy of this, please let me know. It's called Some Thought Concerning the Present Revival of Religion. It's on spiritual pride. There's just so much there, and we'll have to just a copy of it again. Spurgeon, C.H. Spurgeon, a great Baptist pastor from over a century ago, he says this. He says, he kind of gives 4 categories of pride. You might want to write these down, they're not even hard to remember. He calls it this: race, grace, place, or face. Absolutely stunning. Race, grace, place, or face. In other words, you can be proud of your race. You can be proud of the grace that God's given you. That you don't have the problems other people have. You read your Bible every day. Those people who are losers don't. Okay. You could this idea of place. Okay. What is your place in life? What has God done in your life that's blessed you? And the family you're born into, or blessings you have, or face. In other words, how physical situations. Race, grace, place, or face. Humility is always saying from the heart. You might have the ability. So you don't want to say, well, no one's asking you to lie to yourself. Lying is not right either. If you have abilities, the question is, where'd you get those from? Right? And a humble person is always saying, God gave me the ability to do that thing. Yeah. If you can sing, and you're the best singer in the church, there should be no pride there, right? Because God gave you the ability to do that. If you're a person who is talented when it comes to some occupation, who kept your heart beating and the veins flowing with blood while you were learning to do that thing? There's a humble person realizes, I have nothing. And this is the sad thing. I have another message that preaches this. The only thing we can be proud about are things that are gifts to us from God. That's it. Because anything we have that we get proud of over that someone else doesn't have, that is a blessing of God. And it must second the Lord is for us to get this way about it. Spurgeon in Morning and Evening. I don't know how many know about Spurgeon's Morning and Evening. You ought to look at January 22nd sometime. I won't read it all, but it's about humility. And he talks about pride and humility. It blows your mind. I'll make another copy of this too. The church is going to go bankrupt because I'll make so many copies. But if you'd like to get a hold of that, please talk to my assistant, okay? Whoever that is, I don't have an assistant. Okay. Thoughts of superiority, okay? These are gifts of God. 2 Corinthians 10, 17 to 18. But he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord. Okay? Uzziah, it says he was marvelously helped by God in 2 Chronicles 25 until he was strong. But even when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction. Sometimes we don't get proud because we don't have a lot, but then some things flow our way or go our way, and then we can get proud. Accomplishments are a gift of God. Number 4, another symptom of pride is sharp reaction to the actions of others. Sharp reaction to the actions of others. This is hard. So in other words, someone says something rude about you, or they have anger directed at you, or there's a disobedient child, or somebody rubs you the wrong way in a situation. Pride shows up in a sharp reaction to the actions of others. Pride will not stand for anything that rubs the wrong way. 1 Corinthians 13, pride violates the love principle. 1 Corinthians 13 says it's not easily provoked. A proud person is often easily provoked. So let me ask you, do you have a problem with anger? If you got a problem with anger, it's not really a problem with anger. It's a problem with exalting yourself when something doesn't go your way. And it comes out in high-level emotion. Number 5, non-receptive to corrective help from others except on their own terms. I'll say it again. When I'm proud, I'm going to be non-receptive to corrective help from others except on my own terms. In other words, if one of my sister-in-laws wants to correct me, and that's why I don't come to Boston very often because it happens a lot when I get here. No, it doesn't. At least not my faith. Am I receptive to the correction of others? And sometimes people are not, but you might say, well, okay, I'll listen to someone if they say, I got a problem with this. But pride is going to be worth on my own terms. In other words, Pastor Hawkins, when I'm done with you telling me what you're going to tell me, when I'm finished with you, in other words, I may not want to hear everything you have to say. And I'm going to work on my own terms, so back off. Okay? Are you a person that, again, you deflect the blame, you deflect the guilt, and someone, maybe there's a problem with you and your spouse, and you're like, I'm working on it, and you get defensive and proud about the supposed work that you're doing, and maybe you are working on the issue, but it's on your own terms. And you'll get quickly mad if somebody would talk to you about it. Non-receptive. Proverbs 15:12. A scorner loveth not one that reproveth him, neither will he go unto the wise. And sometimes people won't go for counseling because unless they're forced to. Something happens and their wife says, I'm going to lead you, go talk to the pastor about this, and they go. But it's on their own terms. By the way, there's 3 sources of corrective help, and this is going to cause an issue right now. I'm going to say it, but hey, amen. We're almost done. 3 sources of corrective. First of all, from the pulpit. These are biblical sources of correction from the pulpit. That's actually a legitimate thing that the pastor is given. It's his job, actually, to help you in this way, to exhort you. A second source would be from the Holy Spirit. And a third source would be from other believers. Do you know that other believers are actually told in the Bible if they see a problem, they help you with it? That's right. Yeah. Hebrews 10:24. Let us consider one another to provoke unto love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as a man of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more you see the day approaching. Hebrews 3:12-13. Take heed, brother, lest there be in any of you an evil heart of unbelief and departing from the living God, but exhort one another daily, while it's called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. Matthew 18:15-16 talks about if your brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone, and if he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. All these references give a believer permission to help another believer who is struggling.
It's good.
And if we don't like that, listen, let me say this. If you're a person who has gone to people because of a problem you see, it doesn't mean it's your job just because you see the problem. It's not your spiritual gift to point out someone else's faults. Love covers a multitude of sins, actually.
That's right.
So usually we just take the slight, we take the hit, we take the slander, we just lay down like Jesus did and get crucified sometimes. But sometimes there's something that needs to be addressed. God puts in our hearts, or we're close enough, or we're the right person to do it, or we pray enough about it, and we just need to gingerly go. And if we go and someone doesn't want it, it's understandable because we all are defensive, but the Bible actually says we're actually supposed to consider one another to provoke to love and good works. And we're supposed to actually help people lest they be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. So if I see a sin in someone's life and I don't try to help them out, in some level, it's a disobedience on my part. Now, maybe I'm not the person to do it. I'm supposed to pray, but I don't just let my brother go. If they got a bad attitude, everyone's just going to kind of be hands off and, here he comes, don't make me mad, and he's unpredictable as weather, flight as a feather, and you're just like, whoa, ladies, are you like that in your home? Are you unpredictable, and your kids don't really know if you're going to go off, your husband's not really sure, this could be it, here it comes, okay? Men, are you like that? When you come home, does everyone kind of look in your eyes and think, do we put our helmets on now, or is Dad in a good mood, all right? How do you receive instruction and correction from your spouse or another believer? All right. As we move along here, I don't know what number we're on, but it doesn't really matter. Resistance to change. The next one, number 6. Resistance to change except on their own terms. The resistance to change. It's understandable. It's hard to change. We don't like to change, but except on their own terms. Proverbs 26:12. Seest thou a man wise in his own conceit? There is more hope of a fool than of him Number 7, refusal to admit to a need to change even when it's causing problems to others. I'll say it again. Refusal to admit to a need to change even when it's causing problems to others. You could say, well, they don't like the way I do things, but that's just my personality. I'm a choleric, and I'm kind of brush with people, and you can say this, I'm just not very compassionate. Well, let me say this. Here we go. If you say, don't talk to me about the way that I'm just not very compassionate. Well, what you're saying is you're not very Christ-like. Exactly what you're saying.
Good preacher.
So don't blame it on heredity or DNA. Blame it on the fact that if you're not working really hard on this, then you're giving yourself a pass. Because what your family needs is someone who's Christ-like. Not someone who's going to say, well, you knew the way I grew up and my dad was really angry too, or you knew how bad it is to work for the boss I work with. Is God not bigger than the boss you work with? Yeah. When he says, no temptation takes you, but just come to man, means other people have the same pressures and stresses you have, but God is faithful who will not allow you to be suffer to be tempted above you're able, with the temptation make a way to escape. Doesn't that apply to you too? In other words, God's got help for you. Yeah. Because I've kept the Lord always before me, because he's my right hand, I shall not be moved. God will help you in reference to how close you are to him. Number 9, you will not get right with God. Or number 8, you will not get right with God. Number 9, not willing to resolve an offense against another person. Not willing to resolve an offense. Matthew 5:23-26 talks about if you bring your gift to the altar and the remembrance that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. If you're a person here and you're very faithful in your tithing, but you're not right with another brother or sister, God would say, leave your gift, keep the money, and first go be reconciled to your brother. Right? Yeah. Husbands, wives, if you're fighting, God's not really that impressed that you read your Bible in the morning. Because if you're not going to get it right, why should he show you anything? You're not obeying the last thing he showed you or spoke to you about. That's right. It's good. Yeah. Yeah. As we close here, the sadness about pride is that it has to be brought down. Proverbs 18:27 says God will bring down high looks. I don't want God to bring down high looks. I want to get rid of them and be like Christ. Then true humility, as we close here, just quickly, the practice of true humility in the home. Humility is that being low. It's self-littleness. It's a condition of the heart and mind before the Lord says, not my way, not my will. Humility is the only proper position for God's child. It's the only way God can bless your family and your life as he desires. By humility. James 4:6, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. The word resist is the idea of oppose. Do we want God to oppose us? Or do we want God to give grace to us so we can raise our family for God? Do I want God to bless my marriage? Do I want God to bless my kids, my grandkids? Do I want God to bless my work? Do I want God to bless these things? Well, God gives grace to the humble. Psalm 138:6, so the Lord be high, yet hath the respect unto the lowly, but the proud he knoweth afar off. James 4:10, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. Proverbs 18:12, before honor is humility. Humility is the only way to receive the grace you need to stay right with God and to raise your family for God, stay on track. Humility in the home is measured by how much strife is in the home. Because through strife, through pride, the contention is there. And as we close, a humble person will be more concerned about doing right himself and fixing wrongs than another person. If I'm angry at one of you because you're actually not doing right, you have said something about me that was not right, and it wasn't. Anybody knows about it would know it's not right, perhaps. If other people brought into it, but maybe I'm the only one who knows. What you said about me was not right. You actually said something was wrong. Or the way you treated me, I said hi to you in the hall, and you just kind of buzzed past me, and I don't know what your problem is, and I said people weren't nice to me, but it was legitimate in my mind. You offended me. What am I going to do about that? A humble person is more concerned about themselves doing right than fixing wrongs in another person. In other words, if this problem is going to be solved, I've got to do right first. And if it doesn't ever get solved, I'm still going to be right with God. And I'm going to confess where I've been critical. I'm going to confess where I've said things myself. I'm going to confess these things. And if that person doesn't want to, you know what? I'm going to get in a position where I have God's blessing in my life, not to spite them, but where I can actually begin to pray for them. And I'm going to get over my anger. I'm going to get over my wicked thoughts. I'm going to get over my angry thoughts. And I'm going to give this person the Lord and get myself rightly related to God. And can I say this? We get so concerned, and I will have to say, this actually has been a problem with me. When I was growing up, it was just a problem, and I would have to say, it probably still is. I'm a preacher, and I see things black and white. And often I get concerned about something being right. Right? And that's good. I want things right. I want things to be what they're supposed to be. I don't mean like the way I want, breakfast done or something. I'm talking about if someone's not living right, they need to do right. If someone's offended someone, they need to do right. But sometimes I'll go too far with that, and I'll justify the wrong response on my part because she's wrong or he's wrong. And I'll lose my temper. And I'm not so concerned about being right then, because here I am now stepping into the wrong category too. And the reason I step over here is because I don't want to do it God's way, which sometimes is to be loved, right? Always be loved. The guy is humble. I want to fix this wrong. So I'm willing to be wrong also, because this is a greater wrong over here. How dare anybody point that out to me? And what I need to do is say, Lord, I don't think I get this at all, because he came down to earth. You know, when the Lord came down to earth, he didn't come down and right every wrong. When Jesus came down, he did not just go into cities and scorch earth, fire, burn them up. He never one time did. He came and realized the ultimate solution is doing God's will first. And I'm going to lay my life down to help these people later. And if you will lay your life down and realize by laying down my life, by dying to myself, by saying no to my anger, then God will lift me up. God will exalt me in due time. God will begin to bless my life. And then ultimately I can help that person. Me having an angry spirit and trying to correct them, or me holding something against them for years, or whatever it is, now God got two problems. And when is he going to get someone over here that says, you know what, I only have so long before I die. But today, I'm going to die with my feelings about that person. Amen. I'm going to leave them with God, and I'm going to die to what I could do that would not be humble. And the humbleness of Christ brought him down here, and he was obedient all the way to the cross. And now God exalts him too. And now I can save you all and me. So we solved the problem in due time, which is our sin, but it wasn't going to be solved if we just would have come and just started shooting up and down. And if you're interested in justice more than being right, you're going to have problems all your life. Because God has not given you justice. Good. And you're going to be Christ-like, you're going to have to lay down your life also. For the other person in your family, for your spouse, for your rebellious child, for that person in the church, you're just going to have to be clothed in humility. Let's pray together. Amen. Father, I pray.